I'm Jay Elias, General Legal Counsel at Dyer-Lake Funeral Home in North Attleboro. Welcome to this episode of Live and Learn, a series of programs designed to be informative, educational, and upbeat, and always intended to enhance and encourage our personal wellness and awareness. So here's the framework for this episode. There are things in our everyday life that we give little thought to along the way. And even when we do, few of us wonder about their origins. For example, after way too many years of thinking about getting a new mattress and having been bombarded with one too many commercials about the miracles that'll flow from getting a new mattress, sleeping better being the least of them, my wife and I decided to buy a new one. And if you haven't recently bought a new mattress, be prepared for the legion of choices and the range of prices. So when the salesperson said that, on average, a mattress should be replaced every 7 years or so, and then asked us how old our mattress was, let's just say it was a bit humiliating. And as people are wont to do when asked by their doctor how many drinks they've had in any given day or in a week, we understated the mattress's age. And that got me thinking about when mattresses were first used. It turns out that in 2011, what is thought to be the world's oldest known mattress was unearthed by archaeologists in South Africa. That mattress, which consisted of layers of reeds and rushes, was discovered at the bottom of a pile of bedding made from compacted grasses and leafy plants and is thought to date to 77,000 years. At the very least, that made me feel better about my old mattress. Although we know that birds make nests and some animals sleep on grass, the importance of the discovery of those early mattresses from 77,000 years ago comes from learning about the methods that were employed by early man. The mattresses appeared to have been constructed with great purpose, laying grass on top of insect-repelling ash, along with evidence of charcoal from burned camphor wood. Scientists speculated that the medicinal smoke may actually have been used to dispel insects. There was also evidence that early man burned old pest-ridden bedding. Each bed was estimated to be nearly a foot deep, and the bedding piles were relatively close to the back of the cave, away from wind and mist. Moving ahead several thousand years, we come to the ancient Egyptians who, along with their other amazing inventions and technologies, including written language and advancements in engineering, invented the raised bed, keeping people off the cold floor and ground and making it more difficult for rodents, insects, or snakes to crawl over the bed. For the more common man among them, their beds were made of plain wood or simple mats on the floor. For those of higher social status, the beds would be adorned with gold, jewels, and ebony, topped with mattresses made of wool cushions, and even linen sheets were known to the ancient Egyptians 5,000 years ago. If you lived in medieval Europe between the 5th and 15th centuries, your sleeping arrangements would also likely have depended on your position in society. The beds of the wealthy were raised so high off the floor they needed a step stool to reach them. And the period saw the creation of four-poster beds, often hung with heavy velvet drapes and canopies to help ward off cold drafts and insects. As time went on, the poor continued to sleep on simple pallets of hay laid on the floor or on simple platforms. But those of middle class slept in those four-poster beds, often shared with family members. Privacy, it seems, was not a medieval concept. By the 1800s and early 1900s, mattresses were held on bed frames using a woven wood and rope design, which needed frequent tightening of the ropes to ensure a taut, firm mattress for a good night's sleep. And so began the phrase, sleep tight, because mattresses were often stuffed using straw, shredded corn husks, or down feathers, all of which attracted bugs. Over time, it became commonplace to say, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite. And the expression, hit the hay, that seems to have come around when people would physically hit those straw, hay, or feather mattresses to try and get the bugs out before they went to sleep on them. So there you are, sound asleep when your alarm clock goes off. It's been said the alarm clock is a product most of us have an ambivalent and often contradictory relationship with. And some have gone so far as to say the alarm clock, well, it's the devil's creation. It's been written that the development of the alarm clock can be traced to 4th century BC and the ancient Greek poet and philosopher Plato, who owned a large water clock that worked by using water to track the passage of time. It used a hydraulic system of ceramic jugs filled with water to ring with a chirping sound at the desired time, apparently set to chime once in the early evening and once at dawn. The first modern alarm clock is said to have been invented in 1787 by Levi Hutchins, but it could only ring at 4 o'clock in the morning, the time he desired to awaken. And in 1847, a French inventor, Antoine Redier, created an alarm clock with a mechanical movement that had a hole in each number on the face of the clock with a pin placed in the hole corresponding to the chosen hour to be notified. Voila! So everyday things. You may look in your closet and see the same clothes you've been wearing forever. But if it makes you feel any better about how old those favorite pants or sweaters are, according to some scientific studies, humans began to wear clothing about 170,000 years ago, suggesting that our early ancestors first put on clothes after the second to last ice age. But here's an even more interesting tidbit. The supporting evidence about the age of the earliest clothing comes from some very unfashionable sources. Lice. It seems that since scientists tracked when head lice evolved into clothing and body lice around 170,000 years ago, they were able to determine that lice have been with us since the world's first clothes were made. So you get out of bed, you put something on to wear, now what? Breakfast. I think it's fair to say that most of us have heard that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But how true is that? Well, if you wake up hungry, then yes, breakfast may be the most important meal of the day for you. But if you're hungry at other times of the day, then those meals may be just as important to you as breakfast. The origins of the expression that breakfast is the most important meal of the day cannot be traced to any medical, dietary, health, or nutritional studies. Actually, the phrase comes from a 1944 marketing campaign launched by General Foods in an effort to sell more of its Grape Nuts cereal. A print ad and pamphlet handed out in grocery stores said that, quote, "In many ways, the breakfast is the most important meal of the day because it's the meal that gets you started." And for the record, Grape Nuts cereal contains no grapes, no nuts. It's made of wheat and barley. Created in 1897 by Charles William, that's C.W. Post, he used a coffee grinder to turn a flat sheet of baked wheat and barley into tiny kernels that he says resembled grape seeds or nuts. Post came up with grape nuts after being a patient at the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan, which was run by John Kellogg. Yes, Kellogg, as in Kellogg's cereal. And speaking of breakfast cereal, if I mention Breakfast of Champions, you'd undoubtedly say Wheaties. Wheaties cereal has been around for about 100 years. But when did they start putting athletes on the cover? Well, back in 1927, a Minnesota advertising executive needed a slogan to go on a billboard for Wheaties, then a fledgling cereal brand that sponsored the radio broadcasts of the local minor league baseball team, the Minneapolis Millers. So he sketched a Wheaties box and wrote the words Wheaties, the breakfast of champions. The very first character to be on the box wasn't an athlete or even a real person. It was a character known as Jack Armstrong, All-American Boy. And he starred in a fictional radio show sponsored by Wheaties that began in 1933. In those stories, which were on the back of the box of Wheaties, Armstrong was depicted as a popular athlete at Hudson High School who traveled the world plunging into one adventure after another, recovering lost uranium, rescuing passengers from sinking ships, being trapped in a cave of mummies. Since then, one legendary athlete after another has graced the orange Wheaties box. Ted Williams, Esther Williams, Mary Lou Retton, Muhammad Ali, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Phelps, Arnold Palmer, Bruce Jenner, and Serena Williams, to name just a few. Lou Gehrig was the first athlete on a Wheaties box in 1934, but he appeared on the back of the box. That same year, another individual also graced the back cover of the Wheaties box. She was the first woman to have that honor, having been named the best female pilot of 1930, having set the solo endurance flying record, flying more than 13 hours in an open cockpit in 0-degree weather, only to reset that record a few months later by flying more than 26 hours nonstop. She also set the world's altitude record, and remarkably, she flew her plane under the 4 bridges of New York's East River, a feat that has never been duplicated. And no, I'm afraid you'd be wrong if you said it was Amelia Earhart. It was a woman by the name of Eleanor Smith. Olympic gymnast Mary Lou Retton became the first female athlete on the front cover of the box in 1984. And the king of the Wheaties Flakes is Michael Jordan. He's appeared on Wheaties boxes 18 times. By the way, the first sports team to be featured on the box isn't who you think it might be. It was the 1987 Minnesota Twins, who defeated the St. Louis Cardinals in 7 games to win the World Series that year. So you've had your breakfast and you've moved on to lunch. Survey after survey finds that peanut butter and jelly sandwiches consistently rank as one of the most popular lunchtime sandwiches in our country. So let's begin with the concept of the sandwich itself. According to legend, the 4th Earl of Sandwich enjoyed gambling, and it's been said that in the middle of a particularly engrossing stretch at the card table in the mid-1700s, he ate a piece of roast beef between 2 slices of toasted bread so that he could hold the food in one hand while continuing to play cards without having to pause for a meal. Yet other tales say that he wasn't gambling but was instead hard at work at his desk and just didn't want to take a break for meals. We'll never know. Either way, historians know that his title, Earl of Sandwich, has long been associated with the sandwich. But they also know that it's been fairly certain people in England and elsewhere were enjoying sandwiches long before they were ever called that. So how did that classic American sandwich, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, come to be? Who invented the PB&J? Let's start with the bread. The sliced bread, to be specific. Otto Rohwedder of Davenport, Iowa, is credited with having invented a bread slicer in the early 1900s. But the problem was that bakers weren't particularly interested in it because they thought no one would want their bread pre-sliced. Still, he continued to refine the invention and advertise the machine as, quote, the greatest step forward in baking since bread was wrapped. A slogan that's evolved into a saying we hear all the time. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. At about the same time, the pop-up toaster was beginning to catch on in American households. And that helped give Rohwedder the boost he needed to get his latest version of the bread slicer off the ground. And it seems the public loved the convenience of sliced bread. But people soon began looking for spreads to use on it. Which leads us to the jelly. In 1917, Paul Welch secured a patent for pureeing grapes and turning them into jelly. He developed and advertised Grape-Alade, rhymes with marmalade, from Concord grapes. And shortly after that, grape jelly sandwiches were a staple of American soldiers during World War I. It seems that the U.S. Army bought Welch's entire first production run of Grape-Alade because it was an easy, affordable, and shelf-stable product for the soldiers. And when those soldiers returned home from World War I, They sought out the grape jelly in their local markets. The last component of the PB&J sandwich, the peanut butter, came from the need to get U.S. soldiers, once again, more protein during the Second World War. Inexpensive but nutritious, peanuts were ground into a smooth, buttery consistency, canned, and put into soldiers' rations. By the way, the forerunner of the peanut butter that we know today was first brought to light sometime during the 1880s when a St. Louis physician, Dr. Ambrose Straub, made a peanut paste for his geriatric patients who had trouble swallowing or who had bad teeth. Quick digression. On the topic of food, this one sounds like one of Willy Wonka's rejected ideas. It's bubblegum flavored broccoli. The creation was far from fictional. It was a concoction whipped up by the fast food giant McDonald's, with its then CEO telling attendees at a corporate event in 2014 that the motivation was to create a way to get kids to eat healthier. Not surprisingly, it seems that adding bubblegum flavoring to broccoli just didn't make it any more appetizing to kids, who, with their parents, were understandably confused by the taste in the handful of test markets throughout the country, and it never made it to market. So there you are. You've enjoyed your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but inevitably you need to wipe your face and hands on a napkin. Maybe it's a paper napkin, or maybe it's a linen napkin. The napkin has had a variety of contributions from different cultures. The word itself originates from Middle English and from the French word meaning a cloth to cover a table. But what may be most interesting is the fact that the first iteration of the napkin is said to have found its origins in ancient Greece. And it was, believe it or not, a lump of dough cut into small pieces, rolled and kneaded at the table in front of the diner. The ancient Greeks would dab their fingers on the dough to remove particles of food and grease. And on the subject of food, it's said that the taste buds on our tongues and the roofs of our mouth detect 4 categories. There's some debate about a 5th one: sweet, sour, spicy, bitter, and that controversial one, savory or umami. That sense of taste or flavor is actually a combination of taste and smell. That happens because as you chew, you force air through your nasal passage. The food scents or odors are detected by receptor proteins at the tips of the sensory cells in your nose, which in turn sends messages to your brain. And it's those 2 messages that create what we perceive as a flavor or a taste. By the way, recent research reveals that we can smell at least 1 trillion scents through about 400 types of scent receptors. And we know that our sense of scent or smell can immediately trigger food memories and emotions. A smell can instantaneously trigger a food decision. Think about how bakeries and even fast food restaurants use vents from their ovens or grills to pump the scent of their food into the front of the stores, into a mall, or outside the building, so that even before you walk in, you can smell their food, and your memories, they've been sparked. That, in turn, encourages impulse buying. Subconsciously, just through your sense of smell, you're often unwittingly compelled to buy something, anything. And why do so many of us say our food tastes better when we eat outside? Is it because we associate eating outside with special occasions like picnics when we were younger? Do our memories set our expectations about what we're about to eat? We do know that being in the midst of natural elements can have a positive effect on our mood and our mental health. Even our productivity and creativity surges when we're surrounded by plants or fresh air. It's been shown that when we breathe in fresh air, it can make the food we're eating taste more flavorful. So now the day is winding down, and you're having dinner with friends or family. Every day around the world, people celebrate big and even small events, sometimes just being in one another's company with a glass of wine. Glasses are raised in the air and a simple toast is made. We may toast to health, wealth, happiness, or any number of reasons. But why do we call it a toast? Well, it seems the expression comes from the practice of literally dropping a piece of toast in your drink. In the 16th century, it was apparently common practice to add a piece of scorched or spiced toast to the wine glass to help to soak up some of the acidity and improve the flavor of poor wine. It would also help and soften stale bread. And now the end of the day. It's near and it's time to turn in. If you anticipate that you may have a little trouble falling asleep, maybe you'll have a nightcap, named after the night cap worn to keep your head worn and warm in earlier times. Or maybe you'll make yourself a cup of warm milk. So, which one is better? A number of studies suggest that drinking warm milk before retiring for the night not only can shorten the amount of time it takes to fall asleep, but make the sleep more restful. It seems that most surveys tell us, though, that the truth is it actually has less to do with the milk itself than the act of warming the milk, of taking care of yourself in a quiet setting. The process of warming the milk, stirring it, making sure it doesn't scald or burn, letting it cool, that process offers a calming routine, tradition, and ritual for some. And it's that ritual that we can focus on rather than the cares that may be burdening you before you hit the hay. And although alcohol may seem like it would help you fall asleep, alcohol is actually more of a stimulant. It's known to interfere with substances in your brain that allow for continuous sleep. The result is repeated or partial awakening throughout the night, leading to fewer hours of truly deep, restful sleep. So opt for that warm glass of milk or a cup of chamomile tea. I'm Jay Elias. Thank you for watching this episode of Live and Learn. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to your joining me again for another program designed to enhance and encourage your personal wellness and awareness. Until then, remember, it's never too late to learn. And in closing, consider this, trite as it may sound. Every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day.